Clara knelt, pulling the girl into her arms. "I ain't going nowhere tonight," she promised, voice breaking. "Not tonight." Outside, the prairie wind rose, carrying the faint sound of thunder far off in the hills, a warning that the calm was ending again. The next Sunday, the sky hung low with clouds that looked ready to burst. Clara almost didn't go to church, but Eli insisted. "You've got nothing to hide," he said, hitching the wagon. "Folks need to see that." She wanted to believe him, but as the wheels rattled down the dirt road toward Miller's Crossing, her stomach twisted like a rope pulled tight. The children sat beside her, Annie clutching her doll, Ben swinging his legs, Sam staring straight ahead with a jaw too hard for a boy his age. Eli drove in silence, his face carved from stone. The church stood at the edge of town, whitewashed but worn, like everything in the West. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. When they entered, conversations faltered. Clara felt the weight of every stare. Women looked her up and down, lips pressed thin. Men leaned in to whisper. She walked to the back pew, head low. Eli stopped beside her. "Sit with us," he said quietly, nodding toward the front. She hesitated. "Eli, sit," he repeated, so she did, beside him, beside his children, and in that small act, that simple defiance, the whispers began again like snakes in dry grass. When the preacher started his sermon, Clara barely heard a word. Her mind drifted to her past, the faces of people who had once judged her, the child she lost, the husband buried in a grave with no marker. She'd promised herself she'd never let shame chain her again, but here she was, trembling under its weight. After the service, as people filed out, Mrs. Hargrove appeared, all smiles and poison. My, she said sweetly. "It's so good to see you settling in, Miss Evans. I suppose the children needed some woman around." Eli stepped between them before Clara could speak. His voice was calm, but his eyes were steel. "Mrs. Hargrove, you ever lose a husband? Ever wake up wondering if your kids'll eat that day? No? Then don't you speak another word about this woman." The silence that followed was sharper than a gunshot. Clara felt her breath catch. Mrs. Hargrove flushed crimson and turned away. But the damage was done. Half the town had seen the exchange. That afternoon, on the ride home, Clara tried to thank him. "You didn't have to defend me," she said quietly. "I did," he replied. "Because you're part of this family. Now whether they like it or not." She turned toward him. "You mean that?" His hands tightened on the reins. "I ain't one for fancy words, Clara. But I know what I see. And I see a woman who keeps my home warm, who made my children smile, again, and who's stronger than most men I've ever known." Her eyes stung with tears. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the steady rhythm of the horses filled the air. When they reached the ranch, the wind picked up again, cold and biting. A storm was coming. But this one wasn't from the sky. 2 riders waited near the gate. Sheriff McCrae and the local banker, Mr. Allen. Eli climbed down from the wagon, shoulders tense. "Afternoon, Eli," the sheriff said. "Heard some talk in town. Folks say you brought a woman here under false pretenses. Say she ain't who she claims to be." Eli's eyes narrowed. "You calling me a liar, Sheriff?" "No," McCrae said carefully. "Just doing my job. But it'd help if the lady told us where she really came from." Clara's heart pounded. Her hands went cold. She'd kept her past hidden. Not because it was shameful, but because it was painful. She'd been a nurse once, during the smallpox outbreak in Kansas. She'd lost everything, her husband, her baby, her home, when people blamed her for bringing the sickness. They'd burned her house to the ground. She looked up at the sheriff, voice trembling but clear. "My name's Clara Evans. I've done nothing wrong. I came here to help this family, and I'm staying no matter what you heard. Eli stepped beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. That's all you need to know. The sheriff studied them for a moment, then tipped his hat. Reckon that's good enough for me? He turned his horse. For now. As they rode away, Clara let out a shaky breath. Eli looked at her, something soft in his eyes. They'll keep talking, she said quietly. Then let 'em, he answered. We got work to do, and a life to live. And for the first time, Clara believed it. But out on the ridge, unseen by either of them, a shadow watched. A man with a scar down his cheek and a letter in his coat pocket. A letter with Clara's name on it. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with her yet. For 3 days, the shadow on the ridge didn't move. Clara saw him once, just before sunset, a lone rider watching the Carter ranch from afar, his figure dark against the burning sky. She said nothing to Eli, though the sight of him left her hands trembling long after the light faded. The 4th day, he came closer. Eli was in the lower pasture, fixing a broken fence, when the stranger rode up the trail. Clara stood on the porch, heart thudding in her chest. She recognized the horse first, a black mare with a white blaze, and then the man. The scar on his cheek, the deep-set eyes, the voice she thought she'd never hear again. Clara, her name, spoken like a memory in a wound. Thomas, she whispered. Eli straightened, frowning. You know this man? She swallowed hard. He was my husband. The air seemed to vanish between them. Eli's face went still, unreadable. Thomas dismounted, hat in hand. I was, he said softly, but she thought I was dead. The truth poured out in pieces, how Thomas had been taken by a gang while traveling for medicine during the epidemic, how he'd been left for dead, found months later by a trader heading west. By the time he made it back to Kansas, Clara's house was gone, her name blackened, her trail cold. He'd searched for her for years, and now, somehow, he'd found her. You never wrote, Clara said, tears burning her eyes. You never sent word. I buried you in my heart. I couldn't, he replied. I didn't even know if I'd live. When I heard you'd gone west, I followed. Eli stood silent beside them, jaw clenched, eyes flicking between the two. You said your husband died, Clara. I thought he had, she said. God help me, I did. The children appeared in the doorway, Annie clutching Ben's hand. Confusion clouded their small faces. Mama? Annie asked, voice trembling. The word froze everyone. Clara turned, heartbreaking at the sound of it. Thomas's eyes softened, a mix of shock and sorrow. Mama? He repeated quietly. You have children? Eli stepped forward. They're mine, and she's the only mother they've known since my wife passed. The tension between the two men was thick as thunder. One carried her past, the other, her future. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara sat alone by the fire. Thomas's voice echoed in her mind, mingled with Eli's quiet steadiness. She had prayed for years to be needed again, to have a home. And now that she'd found it, her old life had come to claim her. When the door creaked open, she looked up to find Eli there. His hat was in his hands, his eyes shadowed but gentle. You don't owe me nothing, he said quietly. If you want to go with him, I won't stop you. But if you stay, he hesitated, searching for words. If you stay, I'll be grateful every day I'm alive. Her voice was a whisper. Eli, I don't even know who I am anymore. You're the woman who saved 3 broken children, he said. And maybe me too. By morning, Thomas was gone. He left before dawn, leaving behind only a note, a short, tired scrawl. You built a life worth living, Clara. Don't lose it for what's gone. She stood on the porch as the sun rose, light spilling across the fields. Eli joined her, his hand brushing hers. The children came running out behind them, laughter chasing away the last of the night. She turned to Eli, her eyes soft but certain. "I can't be a mother, Eli," she whispered, the words trembling with truth. He smiled, the kind of smile that healed. "You already are, Clara. I've got 3 calling you mama already." The wind lifted her hair, the world around. Them alive again. For the first time since she could remember, Clara didn't feel lost. She felt home, and in the heart of the Wild West, where sorrow and love rode side by side, that was all anyone could ever hope for. The wind that day was cold enough to split the lips of anyone foolish enough to smile. Clara Evans hadn't smiled in years. The trail dust had turned to mud under her boots as she stood beside the wagon that carried everything she owned, which wasn't much. A small chest, a mirror with a crack running down the middle, and a letter she'd carried across 4 states without ever opening. She wasn't running from the past anymore. She was trying to survive it. The war had taken her father. Disease had taken her husband, and poverty had taken her pride. All she had left was a promise scribbled by a stranger who called himself Eli Carter, widower, age 35, rancher. The letter, written in a man's careful, uneven script, had asked her one simple question. "Would you consider starting again, Miss Evans, not as a wife for love, but as a mother for 3 who no longer have one?" Clara had almost thrown it away. She couldn't have children of her own. A doctor in Kansas had told her after a fever nearly killed her that her body was too broken to bear life again. She'd buried that truth deep inside her heart, and with it the hope of ever being called Mama. But something about that letter, the quiet desperation in its simplicity, wouldn't let her go. So she'd answered. Not with hope, not with love, but with something more stubborn. The will to keep breathing. Now, standing on the edge of the Wyoming frontier, she was about to meet the man behind that letter. The wind carried the smell of pine and smoke as a horse approached from the ridge. The man riding it was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a worn leather coat, his hat tilted low against the sun. As he came closer, she saw the hard edges of his face. A man used to losing more than he won. "You must be Clara," he said, voice rough from years of dust and silence. "I am," she answered, clutching the hem of her coat. "And you must be Mr. Carter. Eli's fine." He dismounted, dust rising around his boots. "The kids are waiting. They ain't used to company." He helped her onto the wagon, his hand calloused, steady, warm despite the cold. The touch startled her, not because it was rough, but because it was gentle. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before she spoke again. "You said, in your letter, that you wanted someone for the children, not a wife." He nodded. "That's right. I don't need a wife. I need a woman who ain't afraid of hard work and who'll treat 'em kind." Clara swallowed hard. "And if I can't be a mother?" He looked at her then. Really looked. "Then you'll just be Clara. They'll figure out the rest." That night, when she saw the 3 children, 2 boys and a girl no older than 8, she saw the fear in their eyes mirror her own. They'd lost a mother. She'd lost the right to ever be one. And yet, as the youngest crawled into her lap without asking, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. A beginning. But in the West, beginnings came with storms, and one was already rolling over the horizon. The first night on the Carter ranch was quieter than Clara expected, the kind of silence that felt alive, like the land itself was watching. She couldn't sleep. Through the thin wooden walls, she could hear the soft breathing of Eli's children in the next room and the crackle of the fire downstairs. She got up and went to the window. The sky was wide and endless, filled with stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. She thought of the city streets she'd left behind, the smell of coal smoke, the cries of hungry children. Out here, it was different. The air was sharp, the earth honest. It didn't lie to you. The next morning, she woke before dawn to the sound of boots on the porch. Eli was already up, shirt sleeves rolled, chopping wood. When he saw her, he nodded toward the barn. "Coffee's in the pot. There's chores to be done after." She poured herself a cup and went to work beside him. The horses were restless. A storm was coming. She could feel it in the air, heavy and strange, pressing down like a warning. The children followed her around shyly, curious, but silent. The youngest, Ben, held onto her skirt as she worked. The girl, Annie, kept her distance. The oldest, Sam, refused to speak to her at all. That evening, the sky turned black and the wind began to howl. Eli moved through the house, latching windows and checking the roof. Clara helped him pull the animals into the barn, her dress soaked through with rain, hair sticking to her face. Thunder cracked across the valley, close enough to shake the walls. "Stay inside," Eli shouted as she ran back toward the door. But she didn't listen. The smallest lamb had broken free, bleating in terror. Clara chased after it, her boots sinking in mud. She grabbed the animal just as lightning split the sky. In that flash of white, she saw the fear in Eli's eyes as he ran toward her. He caught her arm and dragged her back to the porch, his jaw tight with anger. "You could have been killed." "It's just a lamb," she said, breathless. "No," he growled, voice low and breaking. "It's more than that." For a moment, the storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by the storm in his chest. He turned away, rubbing the back of his neck. "My wife, she died in a storm just like this," he said quietly. "She went after one of the horses. Never came back." Clara felt her throat tighten. She hadn't known. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said, though his voice was rough with grief. "It's been 2 years. But the kids, they still think she's coming home. Every time thunder rolls, Annie runs to the window." Clara looked toward the small shape of the girl at the stairs, clutching a blanket. Her eyes glistened in the dim light. That night, after the storm passed, Clara tucked the children in herself. Annie wouldn't let go of her hand. Ben mumbled in his sleep. Sam watched her from his bed, suspicion softening just a little. When she returned to the parlor, Eli was sitting by the fire, turning his hat in his hands. "You did good with 'em," he said quietly. "They ain't smiled like that in a long time." She hesitated at the doorway. "I don't know what I'm doing, Eli. I can't be." He lifted his eyes to hers, steady and sure. "You don't have to be their mother right away, Clara. Just stay. That's all they need." His words settled deep in her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel like a stranger on borrowed land. Outside, the wind calmed. The rain turned to mist. And somewhere in that silence, Clara Evans began to belong. Not as a wife, not yet as a mother, but as something she hadn't been in years, home. Spring came slow to the Carter ranch, creeping in with thawed rivers and restless mornings. The snow melted from the hills, leaving behind patches of green and mud so deep it swallowed wagon wheels. Whole. Clara had been there nearly 2 months now, and every day felt like another small victory, another reason to stay. She had learned to milk the cows, mend fences, and quiet Ben's crying when the night thunder rolled. She'd taught Annie to braid her hair and coaxed Sam into reading by the fire, his stubborn silence breaking in small, hesitant words. But not everyone in the valley took kindly to her presence. The nearest town, Miller's Crossing, was 10 miles east, a dust-bitten settlement of saloons, a church, and too many eyes. When Clara rode in with Eli one morning to trade for supplies, she could feel the stairs prickling against her back. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men smirked over whiskey glasses. One woman in particular, Mrs. Betsy Hargrove, the storekeeper's wife, eyed her like a hawk circling prey. "So," Betsy drawled, her voice sweet and sharp, "you're the new one living up at the Carter place. They say Eli sent east for you. Mail order, was it?" Clara kept her chin up, but her voice trembled. "I came here by choice, Mrs. Hargrove. I'm just helping with the children." Betsy's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I'm sure. That's all you're helping with." The words cut deep. Not for what they said, but for what they implied. Clara had known gossip before, but out here rumors could destroy a woman faster than a drought could ruin a crop. When she returned to the ranch, her hands shook as she unpacked the wagon. Eli noticed. "Something happened in town?" he asked. She tried to shrug it off. "Folks just talking. Nothing new." He frowned. "Talking about what?" She looked at him, at the way the light hit his face, the faint scar near his temple. He was a good man. She knew that now. Too good to be dragged into the mud on her account. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "They just don't understand." That night, after the children were asleep, Eli found her sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. "You listen to me, Clara," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You've done more for this ranch, for my family, than anyone since she passed. Let 'em talk. I don't give a damn what they think." But she did. She cared deeply, because every whisper made her question whether she truly belonged. A week later, the gossip turned crueler. A letter arrived addressed to Eli Carter and his mail-order mistress. The handwriting was childish, but the malice wasn't. Sam found it before Eli did, and when Clara saw the boy's face, red with anger and shame, something inside her broke. She went straight to Eli. "I can't stay here if it's going to hurt them," she said, voice shaking. "The children need peace, not scandal." He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed. Then he stood and said quietly, "You're not the problem, Clara. They are." But that night, when the house was quiet, she packed a small bag anyway. The only thing that stopped her from leaving was the sound of a child's voice. Annie, standing barefoot in the doorway, clutching her ragged doll. "If you go," Annie whispered, tears glinting in her eyes, "who's gonna sing me to sleep?"